Good morning. You guys ready for this? Well, it's been a great week. You know, campus has begun. Of course, you know, that means campus people, they got to start thinking again. Back to reality. So I thought I'd come down to campus and hang with the boys. Yeah, and I got challenged to some foosball. Yeah, I got challenged to some foosball, and there was a brother who was kind of cocky. You know, this old guy, you know. So I said, okay, you know, I'll do this. And I crushed him. So please be praying for Johnny. You know, he's still smarting a little bit after that. So we're getting a few more babies in the fellowship. And of course, you know, the Russells will have a baby. You know, we're like going to triple in babies. Very fruitful in many ways. You know, we're going to start splitting the church, believe it or not. Yeah, into two house churches. We're going to have the Montanos lead one half. This is the only time that division is a good thing, right? Because it forces people to step up. And that's what we got to do. It's going to be awesome to see people growing. You know, our goal is to be at 100 in membership. And right now we're actually only at 48. We started last year with 21. And what is it, a year and a half ago? 21. And that means that this is going to kind of double. Which means, you know, we normally have about 80, 90 in attendance. So imagine 160, 170, 180 people on Sundays. Imagine Kids Kingdom, what that's going to look like. And that means we need a lot of you to just step up. And we're going to have a lot of new people in here, and they're going to think you know what you're talking about. And you got to know what you're talking about. You know, this is the year of vision, 2020 vision. Got it? Question is, where will you see yourself at a year from now? What's going to change? What's going to be different? Some of you will be dating. Yeah, scary stuff. Maybe we'll have a wedding. Yeah, you never know. Miracles happen. A lot of you will become Bible Talk leaders, which means you got to lead. Bible Talk leaders. Some of you, it may be just overcoming certain areas in your heart, things that have owned you, dealing with anxieties and fears and laziness, but it's all about growth. And there's nothing fun about being stuck. You know, you look back a year ago, are you in the same place you were a year ago? There's nothing inspiring about that. And here's the thing, you can't really walk with Jesus and not change. So the title of our lesson is, Can You Drink the Cup? Look in Matthew chapter 20, and Jesus had a few things to say about all this, as he always does. Matthew chapter 20, starting in verse 20. 2020, vision. There it is. Matthew 20, verse 20, it says, Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked a favor of him. What is it you want, he asked. She said, Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, and who's that? The other apostles, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You know, this is a great passage about leadership and growth. Now, first of all, you look at the sons of Zebedee. Well, who are they? That's James and John. And in Mark 3, Jesus gives them the nickname Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. You know, it's kind of like Victor and Johnny. Where is Johnny? He's hiding. He's embarrassed about that foosball game, I think. Now, let's look back a little bit here. Why does the mom do it? If they're the sons of thunder, what's going on here? Well, parents will always do that. They'll push for their kids. Am I right, moms? Yeah, you'll push for your kids. You'll try to get them further along in life. And moms and dads will kind of try to direct the kids the way they think things should be done. And she happens to have an in with Jesus. So she is aggressive here. And she's like, hey, listen. And it says she kneels in front of him. She's taking the humble approach here. And he's like, okay, what do you want? And she expresses this thing, you know. But she's smart. She grabs a hold of the opportunity to make it happen. You know, moms are awesome. But they can be pushy. Yes. They can kind of, you know, and you're like, I don't want to go there. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Now, you know, when I was growing up, I had a few girlfriends. All right. And your mom will always make sure you know how she feels about this person. Am I right? But then when Barb came on the stage, it was like, oh, I like this one, you know? And she stuck, you know, I don't know. It's just, I think my mom had a lot to do with this. I don't know. You know, I had a friend in high school who the mom was pushing for him to be incredible in music. He was playing the trumpet. And she was really pushing him. And he didn't like it, didn't want to do it. And so she would send him to someone to help him, like Saturday mornings, like a tutor. And she would give him money every Saturday to do that. Well, he quit doing it, unbeknownst to her. Yeah. So he would pocket the money and go play video games or whatever. Well, then it just so happened that there was a family event, and all the relatives were there. And she's like, go get your trumpet. I want you to perform in front of the family. Of course, he would fake throughout the week trying to practice all that. And it was ugly. Super ugly. Now, there was a little heated conversation that I remember. All right? But mom will have her way. And that's just how it is. And we need moms to help us out. Sometimes we need a good swift kick. That's just how it is. But Jesus says to the guys, can you, not mom, can you drink the cup? And they're like, yeah, we can do it. And he's like, yeah, you're going to drink the cup. But then he goes on, he starts talking about other things, right? Jesus had an expectation. You will drink the cup. And a lot of times we don't like Jesus' expectation for our lives. A lot of times, like we don't like mom's expectations, a lot of times we just don't like Jesus. So point number one is Jesus' expectation. Now, some people really want to excel, and they'll sacrifice to excel, but some people just don't. Let's look at a passage in Matthew 25 where Jesus talks about this. Matthew 25, verse 14. Verse 14, it says, again, and this is Jesus sharing a talent, or a parable about a talent. He says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one, he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also, the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Okay, so here you got three guys, and it says they were given a talent. And a talent is kind of like a sum of money, and it's like more than $1,000. And the whole bottom line of the story is this, this is Jesus, and we're given talents. We're given things. We're given abilities and material things. And there's an expectation to take what has God given you, and what are you going to do with it? And there's an expectation. So you got the three guys. You got the 1, the 5, the 2, and the 1. And it says according to their ability. All right? The 5-talent guy, it says he at once went to work. And that says something about his heart right there. And he reproduced the 5. And the challenge for us is, are we reproducing what we've gotten from God in other people and situations, whatever we've been given, what are we doing with it? What kind of dynamics have we created with our life? Then you got the 2-talent guy. He's not as talented as the 5, but he still doubles what was given him. And it shows that it doesn't matter how many talents you have, it's what do you do with it. Aggressive spirit. And a lot of times, we can rationalize, well, I'm just not talented. Yeah, but there are things that you can do. And then you got the 1-talent guy. What does he do? Digs a hole and buries it. He did nothing with what was given. And there are people like that in life. They just live for the weekend. They live for the escape. They're not thinking about, all right, they're doing enough to get by. Now, if you're a parent and you have a teenager, you know what I'm talking about. It's amazing to me that they can sleep till like 1 in the afternoon. What are you doing? And it's almost like in their minds, I'm a teenager, I have an excuse. I'm a teenager. And you wonder, what's going to happen to this kid of mine? Not that any of my kids did anything like that. And then you wonder, what's going to happen? You walk in the room and you're amazed. How does anybody get through this clothes and stuff? There's a plate under the bed. It's like, what are you doing? Of course, they're up till 3 or 4 a.m., playing with other games that they can. The question is, what defines you now? Do you take what God has given you, or do you bury it? What kind of impact are you having with your life? How have you changed the world around you? Now, there's a guy. He was a president. His name is Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt, if you ever read about his life, he's absolutely amazing. And very few people realize that he grew up a very sickly child. And the parents constantly had to take him in to get help because he was so sickly. And they say that if he was alive today as a child, that they would have loaded him full of drugs just because of how he acted and so on and so forth. But because of his spirit, he excelled. And he became inspirational president. He was actually speaking here in Milwaukee one time. He was at a podium, and somebody in the crowd shot him in the chest. Boom. And everybody grabbed the guy and started pummeling him. And he went down into the crowd to see if the guy was okay, came back up, finished the speech, and then went to the hospital. Powerful dude. All right, he says something about character. He says it's not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. And see, there's a lot of people who can criticize people who are in the battle. But what are you doing? Are you just sitting on the sidelines, or are you in the battle? All right, let's read on. Verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I return, I've received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him, and throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness. Well, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Wow, that's an intense little talk right there. But it defines a lot about character and leadership. You got the 5-talent guy. All right, now before we get into it, this is really a story of Jesus coming and looking at our lives and what have you done. Once again, there's an expectation. And we will have to give an account for our lives, because that's what the Bible says. So the 5-talent guy says, well done, good and faithful servant. It takes a person to be faithful, to really move forward, to be aggressive, to change, and trustworthy. And the question is, are you that guy? Are you that girl? Are you a trustworthy person? Do you say or do the things you say you're going to do? Do you fulfill the expectations that are given to you? As a church leader, I'll give out roles to people because I can't do this on my own. There's just absolutely no way. And there's always this thing in the back of my head, is it going to get done? And I don't want to have to think about everything. I want to be able to hear that they not only did the job, but they did an awesome job, an amazing job. But if they don't, then, a lot of times it's just training and teaching. And there's a lot of young people and so on and so forth. I remember this summer one time, we were done with services, we were done with the leaders meeting, and what I always do, because the buck stops here, all right, I come throughout the building. And one time I came up here, all the windows were open, the lights were on, the fans, this was still here, everything was still up. And so I had to say, hey, call somebody, say, hey, we gotta get some help here to deal with this, all right? But what does that do for me? It makes me wonder, okay, what's gonna happen? And if somebody does and they do a great job, it takes a lot of pressure off of me as a leader. Now, you guys know, if you've ever been in leadership positions, exactly what I'm talking about. And a lot of times it takes training. And for the most part, hey, listen, I'm not getting down on anybody. This is an awesome serving church. It's amazing. But a lot of times we just got to put ourselves in the leadership position to understand expectation. And there can be a ripple effect when we don't do what we say we're going to do. And this is why this parable's here. There's an expectation to be faithful to do with what is given you. Does that make sense? Question is, when you're given a role, how do you handle it? Are you faithful, trustworthy? Well, he says, hey, to these guys, I'm going to honor you with more. Why? Because you did such an awesome job. I'm going to give you more. Now, some people are like, I don't want any more. I'm good here. Well, that's not growth either. And if you're not growing, you stagnate. And there's nothing pretty about that. Nothing pretty. And so God says, listen, I want to honor you with more. You know, in my younger years, when I first came into the church, I was a very truth-orientated guy. Yes, and I was very harsh. You know, that kind of guy. And a lot of leaders had to sit down with me and say, dude, love you, but no, you can't do that. You got a problem. Yeah, but no. It was bad. I'd walk in the fellowship and, you know, you'd have people move out of the way, that kind of thing. No, it wasn't that bad. All right. But I had to learn a lesson. And God had to work in my heart to sand down all the rough edges. And it'd be easy when I got challenged on things to just kind of, fine, you do it. You know, fine. Get an attitude. But then God does his stuff. And he kind of disciplines us and trains us and teaches us by life situations. So when Barbara and I got married, after a while, she had numerous miscarriages. And, you know, they announced, Shelbrack's pregnant. And then, Shelbrack's pregnant. And it just got to the point where they just quit announcing it. And 7 years went by before we had Tracy. Well, at one point, she had a tubular pregnancy, which is very dangerous. They had to do surgery, and we were told you can never have children again, period. And then one day, she's not feeling good. I got to go to the doctor. I don't know what's wrong with me. And they said, hey, you're pregnant. And she's like, no, not. Can't be. That can't happen. And they're like, yes, you are. And so Tracy was the miracle baby, the immaculate conception. I was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, we had another one. Then another one. Whatever was broke got fixed. I don't know what happened there. But here's the thing. You know, for 7 years, when you're not able to have a child, all of a sudden, when you do, there's a greater gratitude and a greater appreciation. And I know that my parenting would have been a lot different 7 years earlier. And then he gave me 3 daughters. So really soften the heart. And I needed that. And a lot of times God will train the leaders through life's circumstances so that we can learn how to love people. Now, a lot of times we are given things, and the question is, hey, why give you more? What have you done with what has been given to you? And God says, look how I've handled things. You know, James and John, I want the leadership now. I want the honor now. And, you know, you can be young and think, hey, I deserve this. Look at what I've done. Look at what I've done. And people want leadership. And Jesus is saying, you don't know what you're asking for. And leadership is something that has to be rewarded by God. You know, the 2-talent guy, he gave him more leadership. 1-talent guy, what was his response for doing nothing? He blames the master. That's just not a smart thing to do. Verse 24, and the man who had received the 1 talent came, Master, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. And see, what happens is, like this guy, he took what God gave him and he buried it. And you could tell he had an attitude towards God. You know, and we could do that. In our hearts and in our lives, we can be frustrated with God. Why did you make me this way? Why was I born where I was born? Why did you give me these parents? Why did you create this situation? Versus understanding, God says, listen, I know what I'm doing. You've got to embrace what I'm trying to do in your life. And he couldn't get past the attitude. A lot of people don't. You ever met that person who has a chip on their shoulder? They're about everything. It's like, Walk in the room, you throw meat on the floor just to, in case it doesn't attack you. You ever, with a dog, you throw meat on the floor, okay, all right. Good morning. What's so good about it? Okay. All right, so what's the real issue here? He said, I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent. Fear will stop you cold. It'll stop you from doing what's right. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of suffering, fear of looking stupid. But that's a total self-focus versus, hey, I see the needs, and I'm going to push past my fear, and I'm going to do what's right. I may not know how to do what's right. I'm going to find out. I'm going to get advice, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to stand in the gap. And Jesus says, yes, someone who will finally love my children. Someone will be with me in spirit. Now, in this situation, it says he gives the one talent, takes it from him, and gives it to the one who has 10 already. Why would you do that? He already has 10. Because he's going to use it. He's going to do something with it. And that's how God thinks. And it makes sense to God, needs to make sense to us. It's the right thing to do. Then he says, you throw that worthless servant out. He says, okay, you got an attitude. Why don't you just put it in the bank? You could have done something. You chose to be rebellious. And we can be rebellious with God. And God says, you're being worthless. Jesus is very serious about it. He says, hey, it's just not right. So some people choose to stay selfish. Are they going to be happy? Not at all. Let's go back to Matthew 20. Jesus says, hey, can you drink the cup? And then he says, you will drink the cup. But in verse 24, it says, when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. And I think their attitude was, why didn't we think of that? And Jesus teaches them a little bit about leadership here. He says, hey, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's saying, hey, you want to be great? Then you got to be a servant. You want to be first? You got to be a slave. And this is radically different than the process of leadership in the world. So point number 2, Jesus' example. Jesus says, hey, listen, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and to give up my life. See, true leadership isn't about ordering people around. It's about being an example. It's about inspiration. It's about calling people to something they can't do and inspiring them to want to do it and to do it. Question is, are you authoritative or do you inspire by your life? Leadership is about serving. Let's look at another example. Look in Luke chapter 9. You guys with me? Kind of quiet. I don't know. Verse 51. Oh, amen. Luke 9, verse 51. It says, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And he sent messengers on ahead who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But the people there did not welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, all right, here you guys got the guys again, saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? But Jesus turned and rebuked them. And they went to another village. In fact, if you look a little bit later down on the page here, you got a little A there. It says, or B, and he said, you do not know what kind of spirit you are of, for the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. But it shows that, Jesus had given these guys authority. he gave all the apostles authority. And it says in verse 51, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven. So this is later in his ministry. And this is how these guys are still acting. Now, what's going on here? The Samaritans did not like the Jews, because Samaritans were a half-breed people. They're half Jews and half anybody else. And a lot of the Assyrians and the Babylonians took over the Jewish nation, would rape the women, and these were the products of that. And so they were considered unclean, dirty. And so Jesus going by there, they asked, hey, can we? And they're like, no, stay away from us. You know, you think you're better than we are. You're a Jew. James and John are like, let's call down fire. Burn these dudes. How dare they? Don't they know who we are? And see, a lot of people in leadership will act that way. I'm a leader. You need to treat me a certain way. Respect. Now, we do need to respect our leaders. I'm not saying you don't. All right? But the leader has to learn to not put themselves way up above everybody else. That's not kind of the leadership that Jesus is talking about. In Acts 10:25, you don't have to turn there, Peter is talking to Cornelius, who is a centurion in the Roman guard. So he's not a Jew. He is a Roman centurion. And when Peter comes in, he goes to his knees to bow before Peter, and Peter says, get up. I'm just a man like you. What are you doing? And it's interesting how people are trained to treat leaders. That there has to be this, especially religious leaders. There has to be this, oh, holy, holy, holy kind of thing. Now, we're all on ground level. Sinners, all right? But their lives need to lead by life. And there are some strange things that can happen. Strange things happen to me all the time. Visitors will come in and treat me different. Oh, you're the pastor. Oh. I remember when Ray first came, went up and talked to him. He's like, oh, you know, he's not used to it. Then they had us over. It was an awesome meal. I'll never forget it. Lasagna. But they were like, you know, and it's like, what's going on here? And they're like, well, with our old church, you had to set up an appointment and, you know, take a week or two, and then you had to go to their office. Well, Jesus never had an office, okay? He was with the people. That's the way it should be. So you can go at UWM and crush people in foosball. That's what you do. Feel a tournament going on here. Something's going to happen. If they, you know, have the heart for it. I don't know. You know, it's funny that even the church leaders here, every one of them won't call me Jay. They'll call me Pastor. You know, they don't say Pastor Jay either. Pastor Shelbrack. You know, and in the back here, I got a little sign where the pastors park, you know, in the back. It's like, he says, this is where you park. It's like, oh, kind of liking this. You know, one time when we were leading the Chicago church, there's, 400 people there at this time. And one of the women had a birthday. And the father came to the church and he brought this huge cake. And as I was done with the sermon, he comes walking up and he says, can you come with me? And I come down and he said, the pastor's coming through. Pastor's coming through. And then they bring me to the table. And he cuts me the first piece of cake. I'm like, you guys looking at this thing here? This is what's going on here. But what happens is you become unrelatable. Yeah, it's just not right. Let's look at another passage. John chapter 13. Jesus' leadership. John chapter 13, verse 1. It was just before the Passover feast, which means that this is the night before he gets crucified. Jesus was crucified Passover weekend. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter. Can't imagine anybody saying no to Jesus. "No." He says, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you," for he knew who was going to betray him. And that is why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so also should you wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I've done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Okay, so Jesus knows he's going to be crucified, and he knows that Judas is going to betray him, and he still washes Judas's feet. And it says he shows the full extent of his love. And Peter says, "No, you didn't know how bad these bad boys look. Now these guys have been walking in mud and manure, stuff like that all day. And who knows what was on those things, And it'd be kind of like washing Malik's feet. There could be all sorts of stuff in there. Things are growing. You don't know. There's a bump there that shouldn't be there. It's just, man. And Peter's like, "No, you don't want to do this. I can't imagine you, my master, the Lord, doing this." And Jesus says, "You don't get it. I got to do this." And sometimes we want to be served, but in a certain way. Don't do the embarrassing things for me. Don't go there because it's embarrassing. He says, "Well, then I'll have no part with you." He says, "I'm your Lord, and I'm your master, and I'm setting you an example." And he ends by saying, "Hey, no master is greater, no servant is greater than his master. If I'm doing this, then you should be doing it because I'm greater than you are. Nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him." And he says, this is the style of leadership that I am introducing. Can you imagine Pilate washing people's feet? Can you imagine Herod doing it? Absolutely not. And so this was just like revolutionary. But he knew that there would be a difference. And if a leader isn't leading and serving, there's a problem. Because that's what Jesus brought to the table. And see, the question is, can you drink the cup of serving and loving this way? Now, Jesus had a few talents, right? And it even says in verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. So what does he choose to do with his talents the night he's going to die? He washes people's feet. What a powerful visual aid. He could have been doing all sorts of stuff, and he chooses to wash their feet. Well, we can be very prideful people. I don't like to be seen as needy. I just don't like it. You know, this summer when I had my surgery, I was to the point where I couldn't even walk. I was totally at the mercy of other people. And it put me in a situation that I'm not used to. And I know God does that to force us to humble out. And there's things like, no, don't do that, don't do that. And saying, no, you got to let me in your life. You got to let me feel what you feel. Even though it may be frustrating, you got to let people serve you too. Do this and do this, but don't go there. Yeah. There's no off limits. And we got to be trained how to serve like this. But it has an impact, a tremendous impact. Like I said, Jesus never had an office. He had relationships. You know, Jesus saying, hey, follow my example. The question is, what are you doing with your talents? Is it an example or is it an obstacle? You know, there's a lot of great examples of serving in this church. You know, last weekend, we had a leaders retreat, and we went around sharing about different people, and one sister said, you know, when it comes to Barb, you know, there's no one you can compare with. You know, when it comes to women's ministry leaders. And then I said the same thing. I said, she sets the bar. Barb, yeah, I get it. She sets the bar when it comes to serving and sacrifice. She's fruitful too. She leads by life. And it's amazing. You know, I was touched by some sharing with Vlad and Nicole. And Vlad said, you know, Barb, you're the reason we're here. They moved here from New York to a colder area. All right? They moved here, and now they're moving his mom here from Haiti. But because of Barb's relationship with Nicole, he said, this is why we're here. What about me, Dad? Oh, well. Amen. But now you look at Vlad and Nicole, they landed here on, I think it was the end of October, was it? And they're used to serving. That's who they are. And they're like, what do we do? I said, relax. Get settled. Don't worry about it. Well, we can do this with it. Relax. Next week, well, what do you want? What plans do you have? Relax. Relax, relax, relax. And it is hard for them just to relax. Your time will come. And I want to make sure that they're settled in and they're feeling, you know, because you don't want anybody to get overwhelmed. But right away, you know, she jumps into the administration role. Vlad's saying, hey, listen, I can do fundraising things. And they'll, trust me, they will drink the cup. And their time will come. But that's the spirit that we need in the church. I'm very excited for 2020. We got a lot of goals. We got a lot of plans. But it takes this kind of leadership, the serving, and the willingness to be able to step in the gap. I'm going to close with a challenge. And the challenge is, what are you doing with your talents? Is another year going to go by where nothing's done, you haven't changed? Or have you come up with a plan and you're having people hold you accountable to that plan? And you're figuring it out, you're getting advice, and you're going to have an impact because you have talents. We all have talents, amazing talents. The question is, are you going to use them? Let's change Milwaukee. Amen.